Welcome to the Cafe Culture podcast, a season of discussions on culture, politics, philosophy and science.
Thank you very much, Esther, and it's very nice to be here and to speak to you all. I'm very tired because we ran our jazz festival this weekend, so I'm just going to apologise if I seem at all incoherent. I'll try not to be, and I've also got a cold. But just put all that out of your mind for the moment. I thought I'd talk to you a bit about the work we do at Sage, but this isn't supposed to be an advert for it. I just want to give you some background and talk a little bit about how the programme develops, but also focus on some of the questions that has raised in my mind and that might, be things that you might like to discuss about our approach to programming, about music programming in general in this country, about subsidy for the arts, etc., etc. So there are lots of things I think we can have a discussion about at the end. I've also distributed our most recently published annual review, again, not because I'm sort of wanting to promote the organisation, but it's got some interesting facts and figures in it, particularly on page 14, which shows kind of a lot about the number of things we do and who attends them and where they come from, which I find quite interesting and which gives us quite a lot to think about to do with the future. Sage Gateshead will be 10 in December this year. So we opened on December the 17th, 2004. So we're currently sort of planning how we're going to celebrate that and mark that, but also probably more importantly, looking at how we go forward from that point onwards. And as anyone involved in the arts at the moment knows, we've all been putting together bids to the Arts Council for our future funding, and that involves creating our business plans. So we've really been thinking about what we do, who we've reached in those 10 years, but who we haven't reached. Because although we have made a certain impact in the region and nationally, there are lots and lots of people who have never been inside the building. And the longer you're open as a new building, the more some people think they can never go there. I think there must be a human thing that says if you don't go through the door in the first year or so, it somehow becomes a place you can't go to for some reason. So we're really thinking about how we open up our doors and our welcome. So what is the music programme at Sage Gateshead? What am I responsible for? And it's not just me. I mean, I have a team, and we also employ an orchestra. We promote over 400 events across all our spaces, and some outside the building as well. The programme includes probably more or less every kind of music genre you can imagine, from classical to brass bands, what's now called world music, particularly non-Western classical music. We work with Gem Arts, also based in Gateshead, on a programme of Indian and other music from Southeast Asia, to jazz, to folk music, which has always been a specialism, to rock, indie, what we call night out, sort of shows that people want to come and have, just for a good time, to experimental music and much more. We probably have within that the fullest programme of folk and traditional music of any concert hall in the world. Not many would specialise in that area of music, but because of the history of this region and the strength of our traditional music, it's always been something we're very proud of. Our own salaried chamber orchestra, the only full-time contract orchestra in the country. Contract orchestra means they're on a salary, so they are on our payroll. Now Royal Northern Symphonia, they were just Northern Symphonia before, as you may know, over 50 years old, but only Royal since last June. They play, obviously, a key part in our programme as well. We've developed a number of festivals, including Gateshead International Jazz Festival, which ran this previous weekend, a folk music festival called Fiddles on Fire, an Americana summer festival called Summertime, and one-off events, like we were very involved in the Festival of the Northeast last year, which was a region-wide festival in which we played a very active role. People often sort of ask, how do you actually decide what you're going to put on? And then people often say, your job must be lovely. And I think people do think we sit there thinking, oh, I really would like, James Taylor to come. Let's ring up and see if he's free. Of course, it's not really like that. Particularly being out of London, we're very reliant on what is touring. So somebody else is usually making a decision about what is touring. So for popular artists, we haven't yet had James Taylor, sadly. I would love to present him, but everyone has their favourites. It will depend. Often it will be associated with an album coming out because they need to promote the record. We've often in the situation where we think we've got a date for an artist and then the album is going to be late, so it's not ready yet, so they delay the whole tour. In the challenging economic times we've been in as well, quite often, particularly American artists, the agents are looking to make a tour make sense financially right across Europe. And then they find, okay, we've got 3 dates in England, we've got 1 in Holland, Spain, forget it, Italy, forget it, Greece, definitely forget it, the economy just can't stand it. And then the tour doesn't work. So then they say, no, we're not coming. And it is frustrating. We rarely completely cancel, though. We try to postpone and get another date, which often does happen. How do we get a balanced mix? Because I'm assuming maybe some of you might have been. Has anyone been to the Sage Gateshead? Yes? It's not a test, okay. So, and you probably then see our brochure or pick up our brochure, and you can see there's an awful lot of different things, and you might think, well, I wonder how they make a decision about what to do, and is it just, what happened to be available that month? Of course, it isn't as simple as that, and what we're trying to do is present a real balance of different genres, and we do have a kind of a spreadsheet with, 8 jazz, 6 folk music, whatever it is, and we're trying to create a balance for knowing what the audience is for the different genres, but also knowing that however much we individually might like a kind of music, there may not be the product available in that genre for there to be enough good quality work to present in a year. So, for example, in jazz, particularly contemporary jazz, I love it, but actually there aren't many artists that we can put in our main hall 1, to attract enough of an audience. So even though I might keep gaily programming people into that venue, I would soon be criticised for that. It wouldn't make sense. The other thing, of course, is it's all got to add up, and we have to generate money from the whole of the programme, about £700,000 or £800,000 a year profit, if you like, contribution back after the costs of putting the thing on, which is quite a hefty sum. So over the whole year, we have to balance the things that might lose some money, our festivals maybe, or some free programming, or some more niche experimental work, with things that we know the public will pay for and will generate some money back. And it is a real balancing act to make that happen. And as you can imagine at the moment, with cuts, both from the Arts Council and our local authority, although they do still do their very best to support us, and we all know that the local authorities in this region have, had major challenges themselves, we are having to generate more from the programme and from our other activities. How do we make the money work? Well, in a number of ways. Some events are what we call our own promotions. That means we are taking the risk on it. That means we are paying the artist a fee, and if nobody comes, we still have to pay the fee. I always use the if nobody comes factor. So those are things that we have specially chosen to do, we really want to do. We want this artist to come enough to guarantee them money, and then we do our best with our marketing colleagues to attract an audience. Sometimes if an artist is pretty much, a more guaranteed sell, the agent or promoter that we're working with nationally or internationally will split the box office with us because they're pretty sure it's going to do well. So they'll be happy to do that. So they will take a higher proportion of the box office and we'll take a lower just to cover our venue costs. And they'll be taking their proportion to cover the artist costs. And then at the other end of the scale, sometimes people with hire the venue, when they're really sure that this will sell, they want control, they will set the ticket prices. And so we get the income that way. So if nobody comes, it's their problem. Although, of course, they may not come back if nobody comes. And I would say compared to other concert halls in the country, we do more of what we call our own promotions than others because we want to keep the quality up, and that's the way we can choose who's going to come. If we were just what's called a receiving house, that means you're there, you sit there, see if anyone rings up and wants to hire you, then you really don't have a lot of control over what comes. It's what happens to be on the road and happens to be available. And we really feel, because we are subsidised, although a lot of that money is there to support our operation and our orchestra, that we have responsibility to the public to deliver high quality and varied programme. So as you can see, we operate kind of halfway between the subsidised sector and the commercial sector. And some people are quite surprised how commercial we have to be. But actually, I don't think that's a problem. I think in music, compared to other art forms, say visual arts particularly, really there's a very simple contract between the promoter and the audience. The audience is paying for a ticket in order to come and see something that they hope they are going to enjoy. And this isn't meant critically of other art forms, but in say, visual arts where a gallery is free, people are coming in the hope that they might see something, but there's no financial transaction. So they're not actually likely to complain if they didn't like it. They might, people do complain, but if you like, there hasn't been that contract. And I think that's a very interesting thing about the music business, which actually makes it quite straightforward, is there is that form of contract with the audience. It's also struck me at times as interesting that I think people complain more about live music than they do about some other art forms. For example, I don't know what you think about this. If people go to a play and buy a ticket, to some extent I think they know they're taking a risk and they'll see whether they like it or not. With music, somehow people have in their head what they think it ought to be like if they like the artist. And then if it isn't what they were expecting, are very quick to tell us. So we have people going, well, you know, I didn't like it and I want my money back because they didn't do these 4 songs that they were most famous for. And obviously a lot of popular artists are fairly fed up with doing those songs, but no, they need to roll them out every so often, but want you to hear some new work. So you understand. Certainly, I think if people pay to go to a film, if they don't like it, they consider that really their fault, not the film's fault. But somehow in music, everybody wants to tell us what they didn't like. However, of course, they also tell us what they do like. And I would say probably more people are positive about the experience than not. So I said I would talk a bit as well about the rewards and the challenges. The challenges are creating that balance, finding the work, trying to ensure that things come to the north of England that maybe wouldn't normally come or have never come before, but doing the kind of financial deals that we think will work for our budget. Every single concert, and we promote, as you could see in your sheet in the annual review, over 400 concerts a year. Every single one has an individual budget, an individual kind of audit trail, individual load of administration, contracts, etc., etc. It's a lot of work. It's not just ringing up and going, "Are you free?" You know, how about £2,000 or whatever. There's a huge amount. So I think music is very administration heavy, and I often envy my colleagues in theatre, like the Theatre Royal or something. Obviously, we have a great relationship with Philip Bernays, but, you know, if he does a deal, it's for a run, you know, of a week or 2 weeks or longer. Whereas in music, it's nearly always one night. And then next night, you know, tonight we have Goldfrapp band. Last night we had numerous different jazz acts, etc., etc. There's everything, you know, everything changes all the time. I think the challenge as well is that when you're in my position where you're managing a team, it's very easy to just get tied up with all the management and administration issues and never get out of the building to see new work. But we really need to do that. We need to see what's available. We need to go to other countries. We need to go to festivals, showcases. And I do try. And we are invited sometimes by the British Council or by other governments to come and see work. Norway is still very keen for us to go over there. They're one of the few European countries that still seem to have a good amount of cash to invest. So that's another challenge. It's actually making sure that I and my staff actually are refreshed by going out and experiencing work elsewhere and finding out what else is happening. And finally, making the money work in a climate of cuts without losing quality and variety is certainly a challenge, but I think we are rising to it. What are the rewards? Well, it's very simple, and it's actually what I really do like about my job is it is, at the end of the day, really simple. Happy audiences, people who tell you something was the best concert they've ever seen, or they're so delighted that this artist who had never come here before has come here at last and they loved it and it changed their life, etc., etc. And I'm saying these things almost flippantly, but I don't mean to. I mean, last night people were speaking to me about Bill Frisell, who's an amazing American guitarist who was in the Jazz Festival, and saying, you know, if I die now, I'll have seen him and I'll be happy and whatever. And it is very, very satisfying when people tell you that something you've done has, you know, improved their life and made them happy. I see we have a guitarist in the room, so I don't know if Bill Frisell would be... Is that not your guitar? It is, yes. Anyway, we've promoted a lot of guitarists over the years. I hope some that you've liked. Happy artists. I mean, the great thing about Sage Gateshead is the care that was taken with the design of the building and the acoustics and everything. So many artists who come really, really respond to that and really love it. And we have an old-fashioned artist visitors book with, you know, everybody from Sting to famous conductors to whatever, commenting generally about what a great experience they had performing. And because live music every night is different, and the audience and the quality of the room and the quality of the PA system and the quality of the piano and all of these things contribute to the quality of the event. If you can create great conditions for artists to perform, they are usually very, very happy and will perform better and really want to come back, which is very gratifying. Also, we try whenever we can to offer artists new opportunities for a new commission, a new collaboration, and so on. So often they are really extremely grateful for that chance to do something that develops them further as artists. And a guitarist called Chris Sharkey, who comes from Gateshead, jazz guitarist, who now lives in Leeds, we commissioned to do a special work yesterday, first performance as part of the Jazz Festival. And he spoke to me afterwards about how much it meant to him that we had given him that space to do that. And finally, I personally find it rewarding when the money does work out, because I used to have a sort of very simple approach to what I thought made for success in cultural programming. And I thought it was a mixture of love and financial control, because actually if you need to really love what you're doing and you need to love the art form. But if the financial side gets in a mess, nobody's happy. And that hopefully is the approach that I take. So questions to ponder, I think, about music and live music and the music business and the region. People do seem to be still coming to live music events, but over the last few years, there's been a lot of discussion about, you know, will that peter out? Or will people want a different kind of event? You know, will they want something that just lasts an hour? Do they want to come at a different time of day? And yet we find people still in the main are quite keen to come at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. We did, before we opened, think a lot about having things at tea time and having other times. So that's an interesting thing. But sort of deeper than that, you know, what is it about the live music experience as opposed to watching YouTube on your smart television, if you have one, which I have got recently, that is different? And can we guarantee that people will want to continue to have that experience in 5, 10, 20 years' time? And will the halls like ours that were built really to quite a traditional model? So our main hall was built on the model of things like the Musikverein in Vienna, which is called a shoebox, so that it's really perfect for a chamber orchestra and has a great natural acoustic. But, you know, is this going to be any use in 5 or 10 years' time? I ask you. You can come back later on that one. A question that I sometimes think to myself when I realise how things work in other parts of Europe is, in southern Europe, particularly Spain and Italy and so on, a lot of concerts are free. And they're generally been supported by the local authorities. And that is actually starting to go now, as you can imagine, because they're having more serious cuts in those countries than we have. But obviously that gives a very different dynamic. It means more people can access it and more people can come, and probably a wider demographic. But there isn't that contract. There isn't that buying a ticket and buying into the experience. So people might wander in and out, not really commit to the whole evening, etc. And I'm quite interested in that. When we've hosted the Radio 3 Free Thinking Festival for the last 3 years. I don't know if any of you have been to that event.
Culture Northeast has a spot.
Yes. Well, let me tell you the dates of this year's, which is October the 31st to November the 2nd. And we're just starting conversations. We had a conference call with the BBC this week about that. But obviously that, because the events are free, brings us lots of people who may or may not come to music events. That doesn't matter, but it's interesting to just see what the difference between doing free events and doing paid-for events. I mean, having said that, all the different kinds of music that we promote do attract very different types of people. A lot of people think we just put on classical music and possibly folk music. Actually don't realise that 3/4 of our programme is actually other kinds of music, or certainly 2/3. Everything from, as I said, you know, Indian music to brass bands to rock and pop to night out type shows to big bands, whatever. So we do attract very, very broad range of audiences. And finally, a question obviously we've been having to ask ourselves and our board is whether hosting a full-time salaried orchestra is something that we can continue to do and whether it's a benefit to the region. Northern Symphonia was founded over 50 years ago. It's a huge asset. It's been recognised as one of the finest, if not the finest, chamber orchestras in the country. It's not something that we would ever want to dismiss lightly, because once you lose anything like that, you've lost it forever. But some people will say, well, there isn't really an audience for classical music anymore. Who's really interested? You know, is it something, you know, is having an orchestra instead of having, I don't know, a full-time salaried brass band or jazz band, or, you know, what's the value? And if we are going to keep an orchestra, should they be doing different things? You know, is the production of the core classical canon really what we need an orchestra to do these days? Or is it something we should totally celebrate and protect and love and just do as well as we possibly can? Obviously in my job, because I'm responsible at the moment for the orchestra as well, that's a big thing that we've had to think about and how that works. So those are really some of the questions I'd like to leave you with. I think I have done 20 minutes or possibly a little bit longer. So I think I'll just leave it there and see if anyone would like to ask me any questions, or we can open up a wider debate. Okay? Thank you.
Cafe Culture North East is supported by Newcastle University, Peels and the British Science Association. We're also supported by Ginger's Cafe in Dance City, who host the events.